Well, good morning. Thank you for attending this webinar today on protecting business information. We're going to make a start now. So let's go. If you've got any questions as we go along the webinar, just place them in the chat box and I'll answer them, or although I could be coming to the answer in the presentation. Also, a copy of this presentation will be emailed to you after the event as well, and you'll have access to the recording later on through the Business Station website. So let's make a start. My name's David Ashton. I've been a Business Station advisor since 2014 on a range of business management issues, and that's my business, Corporate Supremacy, and the services that I provide. So check out my website and I'll give you my contact details later on. So Business Station, take advantage of the services that Business Station provide. There's a range of advisors that you can access across all business management issues, finance, IT, marketing, communication, social media, and the like. So take advantage of that. And if you haven't already done so, sign up to the Digital Solutions program. So for $44, you'll receive up to 3 hours of business advice, and then you can attend some webinars and workshops as well. So it's quite good value. So take advantage of that. And you can see there the range of services that you can access through that. So what we're going to talk about today is looking at your information security management. So how you manage your records, documents, how you secure your business and personal information about your business, your employees, information about your clients. So increasingly important. But it's looking at it from the perspective of a business owner or a manager, someone that's not necessarily an IT expert or cybersecurity expert, but what can you do in your business to protect your information, your clients' information, customers, and also your business assets. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, but looking at it from a management point of view, policies, procedures, internal controls. So the first area we're going to look at is fraud and corruption, and you probably associate corruption and the like with government, but it can happen in business as well. And we're going to look at what is fraud and corruption first, and then we'll look at some ways and means that you can protect yourself from these sorts of things. So fraud and corruption are intentional acts involving the use of deception to attain an unjust or illegal advantage. So that is someone using your business information, your assets, your finances to obtain a personal advantage for themselves or some other illegal advantage. So fraud, so misappropriation of assets. So, it could be as simple as someone using a company vehicle for personal use when they're not able to, when they're not allowed to. Manipulation of financial reporting, causing loss or liability through deception, false invoicing for goods or services, backdating agreements, exaggerated or fictitious accident, harassment or injury claims, and misuse of leave entitlements. So there's some examples of fraud. They don't have to be big, but they can be costly for your business in terms of financial costs, but it could be reputational costs, or the like. So, and we'll talk about some control measures you can put in place to manage and mitigate these sort of things. So corruption, so that's dishonest behaviour by those in positions of power acting contrary to the interests of the business. So that's people that you employ, you engage to work with you. They may be using their position to benefit themselves rather to benefit your business. So it's an abuse of trust, essentially, that they're using your resources to benefit themselves and not your business. So what are some examples? Payment of commissions, gratuities and bribes, releasing confidential information for an improper purpose. So that's where you need to have secure record keeping. Manipulating a tender process. So purchasing goods and services, giving advantages to their mates, that type of thing over a fair competition. Using their influence dishonestly, blackmailing, not disclosing gifts or hospitality, misuse of internet or email, unauthorised release of confidential private information or intellectual property. So, you as a business owner are going to require your employees and contractors or anyone that's associated with your business to operate in accordance with your requirements. And if they don't do that, if they don't do these sorts of things, then it is potentially, fraud or corruption that they're engaging in to use your resources for their own gain. And, dishonestly going about, doing what they do contrary to the interests of your business. So what can you as a business owner do to prevent these sort of things? Well, it's very clear, very important to articulate, what your expectations are as a business owner in relation to the access to records and documents, use of equipment, use of other assets. So develop and implement policies and procedures that are relevant to your business. Employment contracts, what level of access do staff can have to the internet? Who can use company vehicles? And the circumstances in which they can be used? Who can have access to your records? So, and then ensure a commitment to these policies and procedures at all levels of the organisation. So in your contracts of employment, for example, you include clauses in there around following policies and procedures that you've adopted. You need to identify the potential risks. So look at some of the risks that you do face in your organisation, and then put in place some strategies to ensure that those risks don't actually occur. So you can see there on the right, that diagram shows the process. So developing, your policies and procedures, committing to them at, it's obviously the management level, but also the operational level, doing a risk assessment, undertaking a due diligence, and what that's referring to is when you're employing people or engaging contractors or suppliers, that you do your due diligence on them to ensure that they're the right people you want to engage with, so right organisations. So, for example, contacting referees, doing due diligence on their financial capacity as a contractor or a supplier, asking questions around criminal background, that type of thing. You're perfectly entitled to ask those sort of questions. And with your existing employees and any new employees or contractors you're bringing on, communicate your requirements and the policies and procedures in your induction processes, bring to the attention of new staff the expectations. So it's all about protecting you from misappropriation of your financial and other assets, and doing so in a way that protects you legally, but protects you, in terms of the reputational and actual cost of these things. So good policies and procedures, internal controls, monitoring reviews, so conducting regular audits of your operations. And then if you come across anything, enforcement and sanctions. So it may be that you have to bring in the police to investigate, or for some breaches of policies, you enforce those and sanction employees or contractors or whoever that don't comply with them. So it's all about the planning and management process, so identifying what your risks are, putting in place the policies and procedures and internal controls to mitigate those risks, and then the ongoing review of those to make sure that they're being implemented, and then enforcement and sanction if you find evidence of breaches of those policies and procedures. So the types of policies and procedures that you could implement: a code of conduct for employees and others. So, that's the expectations that you place on people that work for you. Look at conflicts of interest. You can have some policies around that when people need to declare a conflict of interest. So encouraging people to actually report fraud and corruption and other breaches. So you need sort of whistleblower. You need a mechanism to protect them from any breaches. Policies and procedures around receipt of hospitality and gifts. Personal access to files. So who can access files within your organisation? Not everyone needs to have access to your complete IT or financial system. Recruitment, selection, and induction. So, how you developing job descriptions with clearly defined roles and responsibilities, and authority limits. So the recruitment of staff, selection, and then the induction process is where you go about advising them of the expectations, and the contract of employment will have that requirement as well. So leave, managing annual leave, long service leave, roster days off, how, the process for that. Flexible working arrangements. So, working from home, that creates a whole new dynamic now in terms of people, if they're working from home, they're actually working for you and not someone else, or for themselves. So, working from home policies, flexible working arrangements, and the like. So very important to have good controls around that, so that, if people are not physically present in your office, that they are still working to the benefit of your business during their normal hours of work. So risk management plans, so identifying all your risks and putting in place mitigation strategies. Looking at travel management, so use of vehicles, who gets to travel in what circumstances. Use of the corporate credit card's important. Who has access to that? Any spend limits? Approval processes. Procurement and contract management. So this is the process of engaging, purchasing goods and services. Some procedures around that, getting, the required number of quotes, 3 quotes for anything over a certain dollar value, but also the process that you're going to engage contractors so that, and suppliers, so that there is a fair and open process. You want to attract as many people to be able to bid for your goods and services, or bid to supply you with goods and services. So you need to be fair and open in the way that you do that. Confidentiality and release of official information. So, we talked about having people sign confidentiality agreements, and the like, and, for employees, reference to confidentiality in their employment contracts. Discipline policy, so on what basis and how people can be disciplined for breaches of any policies and procedures of the organisation. And, acceptable use of information and communication. So, what level of private use are you prepared to allow for internet and email? In what circumstances are people to have access to the email and internet? So that's an important element as well. And that can tie in with your information, your cybersecurity protection and that as well, which we'll talk about. So you can see there's a range of measures that you can put in place, and depending on the size of your business, obviously the complexity will increase. But the minute you start bringing people into your organisation, whether they be employees, contractors, or suppliers, where there are things that you need to protect, then it's important that you have the procedures, the contracts, the internal controls in place to protect these sort of things. And obviously, that's going to help with your insurance requirements. If your insurance company can see that you've got good processes in place, that may help when coming to negotiate insurance policies. but it'll also protect you financially, protect you reputational wise as well. So these are an important element in making sure that you as a business are, are operating effectively, got good internal controls, and that provides comfort to people that wish to engage your business to for the supply of goods or services, depending on what you do. So there is actually a business development component of this. And we'll talk about that later, but you need to, if you want people to engage your services, then you need to satisfy them that you're a credible business, you're a safe pair of hands to do business, and importantly, their assets and corporate information are protected as well through engaging yourself and your business. So keep all that in mind. But yeah, policies, procedures, very important, and good internal controls and contractual documentation. So the other area that you need to protect as well is privacy, of personal information. So personal information about your staff and contractors, personal information about your suppliers, and other relationships that you have. People don't want their business information put out in the public domain. You need to ensure that you can, any information you collect about others, other businesses or individuals, you have in place the mechanisms to be able to protect that. So we look at, this is all governed by the Privacy Act. So what is personal information? About it, information and opinion about an individual or an individual who is reasonably identifiable, whether the information or opinion is true or not, and whether the information or opinion is recorded in material form or not. So whilst the Privacy Act talks about individuals, the principles can apply across you and your dealings with other organisations as well. It's basically put in place measures to ensure that that information remains private and only agreed persons can have access to that. So the purpose of the Act is to regulate how business collects, stores, disposes, provides access to, use and discloses personal information. So if you're a business with a turnover of over $3 million, you must have a privacy policy, which outlines how you're going to collect, store, dispose, provide access to, use and disclose personal information. If you're under 3 million turnover, it's optional, but you are encouraged to opt in. It's not an onerous thing. I mean, you would have procedures in place anyway, really, whether they be documented or otherwise, around access to information. So again, it gets down to that credibility as a business. You might be asked questions about it by a prospective customer or supplier. If you're tendering for goods and services for government or other entities, you may be asked in a tender document to provide information around how you manage corporate information or personal information. So having, and you might be asked by your employees or prospective employees. So having good policies and procedures, proportionate to the size of your organisation, to deal with private and personal information is good management, but also good business development opportunities as well. So, protecting personal information, so looking at your security arrangements, whether it be security of your premises, security of your information security systems, the IT system, or you might store information in a filing cabinet in paper form. What's the security arrangements around that? So develop a comprehensive plan. Again, determined by the size and complexity of your organisation, its legal environment. Identify the types of information that you collect, and then go about determining, how you then use that, store it, dispose of it, who has access to that, and the like. So, and then as part of that, identify any legal and other compliance obligations you may have. For example, a contract that you have with a third party may require you to have certain measures in place around protecting information. So, and again, as part of your plan, as I said, you need to determine how it's collected, used, stored, etc. Look at your risks. So, as part of your overall business risk management framework, look at some of the risks that might happen, non-compliance with privacy laws, mishandling of personal data, data breaches. There's some of the risks that you may be exposed to. So identify them and put in place risk treatment plans to manage that, to ensure that it doesn't actually happen. And then look at what measures you put in place to protect your personal information, customer privacy, legal compliance, data protection through the life cycle from collection to disposal, or ongoing archiving, and early detection of breaches, the ability to identify intruders. So put in place some solutions around those sorts of things. Reporting misuse or breaches of policies and procedures. Look at procedures around employee commencement and exit. So, what sort of access they're given upon their employment, and then how that access is removed when they terminate, when their employment is terminated. So then that'll protect against misappropriation of information after a person has left your employ. And conduct regular audits. So we talked about these things in the earlier section on fraud and corruption. So, the measures that you put in place for that could quite easily deal with the same issues. So when you're undertaking regular audits, you look for things like breaches of information security, breaches that could lead to fraud and corruption. So it's all part of the one monitoring and review process. And there is some useful information that you can access through the Australian Information Commissioner. So have a look at that website, and there's some tools and resources and other support and information that you can access to help you with that. So the two sections there are looking at both at a point of view, from a management point of view, what you can do to put in place. And, some of it is putting in place measures around, managing your employees, contractors and suppliers in terms of the level of access that they have and any breaches of that. And whilst this presentation is focused on, management from a procedural point of view and auditing and internal controls, we also look in this section around, access through cyber security and breaches of security from that point of view. And, from a manager's point of view, what is available to help you from that. And the federal government has produced this, what they call the Essential 8, which is aimed at small and medium sized businesses. And it's effectively 8 measures that you can put in place to look at things like, protecting your systems from cyber attack. So it looks at things like cyber intrusions, stealing data, denying access to data for monetary gain, external adversaries who destroy data, malicious insiders who steal data, such as customer details or intellectual property, and those who destroy data. So it could be attacks externally, which is what we think mostly about cybersecurity attacks, but it's also, who in your organisation may be looking to damage you, they're as well. So you need to have a focus, not just externally, but also internally. And that's where, the earlier sections on policies and procedures come into play, and, who you recruit and how you go about recruiting them, the due diligence that you put in place when you look to engage people, These are all things that can help you protect yourself. And that's, again, that's coming at it from a manager's point of view, your management, policies, procedures, internal controls, and managing your organisation. And then you put in place, IT systems, software and that to help protect you from these sorts of attacks, and also to be able to monitor your systems to make sure, only those who have access to them are actually the only ones that are accessing. So we talk about, and these are IT tech terms. So if you're not an IT person, then the websites that I'll give you later will help you with that, or certainly speak to your IT people about this. But application whitelisting. So this is what and who has access to your ICT system. Patch applications, so any changes to your computer and its operating system. Microsoft macro settings, putting those in place and blocking macros from the internet. So these are sort of the 8 measures that the government has suggested that business, SMEs in particular, put in place. Low cost, high impact type measures. So application hardening, so removing non-essential software programs and utilities, like restricted administrative privileges. So again, who in your organisation really has to have access to something? Not everyone needs to be able to access every aspect of your information system and financial information system as well. Operating system, so using the latest versions. Multi-factor authentication, so that's the two types of passwords, a password and some other measure as well. I mean, passwords, they're now talking about using past phrases. So rather than just a word, you actually have a phrase. So that's sort of evolving over time. So look at that. And then making sure that you back up your IT every day. And so if you've got, a cloud environment, but also perhaps using a portable device as well. And importantly, don't store that device with your computer. So keep that elsewhere. A lot of people keep it connected up to their system when they should be removing it and storing it in a filing cabinet or something like that. Some other place where it's safe from fire as well. So have a look at those measures. I'll give you the website later where you can, the website's up here. Go and have a look at that Cyber View Essential Aid. Have a look at that website and that'll give you some more information on how you can access these sort of things. The other area that we'll look at now is business continuity. So this is in the case where actually something does go wrong. And how are you going to keep operating as a business? You don't want a situation where you do have a cyber security attack or some other breach of security, or even, the building that you work in burns down, or you lose all control of your IT system. What are you going to do? What measures are you going to put in place to ensure that you can still continue to operate? So, if the internet went down now, how would I continue with this webinar? What's my backup plan? Well, I would plug it into my phone and use the hotspot system. So that might be a backup measure that I would put in place. So, so what is business continuity? It's a management process that identifies threats to an organisation and the impacts to business operations. So that's the first stage, to identify those, and then puts in place a framework to ensure that the impact of those threats are minimised and that you can continue to operate in some form while you get back up to normal operations. So there's the business continuity side, there's also the disaster recovery side. So how do you recover from the disaster? But while you're going through that process, how do you ensure that business continues as best that it can? So building organisational resilience, diminish and avoid disruption, minimise risk and vulnerability, and ensure a timely resumption of operation. So that's essentially what you identify the threats, and then you put in place mechanisms to achieve those 4 things. And there's a template that you can access, which will help you put together a plan, and that's what that website is there. So go and have a look at that template. So the planning process, the first stage is to look at the risks to your business, develop the business continuity strategy based on that. So the risk plans and that, and then the measures that you're going to put in place to continue operations. Develop plans, and you might have a separate plan for different functions of the organisation. Organise your teams, or it could just be you. I mean, your business continuity plan could just be one page, depending on the size of your business. These and the complexity of it. These don't have to be voluminous documents. I mean, if you lease an office space and you can't get access to that office during the day for some reason, well, your business continuity plan might just be to work from home. So it really depends on the size and complexity of your business that would determine the extent of your business continuity plan. You need to obviously implement the plan and test it, and review and maintain the plan. So, larger organisations might have a business, a test, a bit like fire drills and those sorts of things, where they test their operating systems to make sure that they work effectively. So you may do something similar here. So you need to identify, in developing your plan, it's really that risk assessment, and then putting in place the treatment plans for that. So identify and prioritise the business processes and the processes to reduce the risk and limit the consequences of disruption. Description of the threats that may lead to disruption, conditions for activating the plans, and emergency procedures which describe the actions to be taken following an incident. So it's really from a step-by-step process. Look at what your risks are to disruption of your business. Put in place the risk treatment plans for those, and then monitor those and test them regularly. Look at fallback procedures. So, in the case of if things do shut down, whereby you can continue to operate. So, as I said, it could be moving essential activities or support to alternative temporary locations, bring processes back into operation in the required timescale. So you may have a staged approach to bringing back certain operations, procedures to return to normal business, maintenance schedule to test the plan, awareness and education. So, bring your employees, your contractors, your suppliers involved into the process so they understand how you're going to manage these things. Your induction process for new staff, draw to the attention of that, and regular communication and reinforcement at toolbox meetings or any other communication you have with staff and others. Identify roles and responsibilities. So you might allocate, responsibilities and roles to various people in your organisation to ensure, ongoing management and testing of the plan, but then also when issues do arise. So that's business continuity. Now, in terms of your information security, so this is basically all the information you collect, whether it be in a paper form or electronic form. You need to have in place some mechanisms to protect all that information and protect it from unauthorised access essentially is what it's about. So again, it's all, from a management point of view, looking at it from a policy and procedural perspective, having procedures in place to guide your employees and others in the management of the business and other personal information. So the purpose of the information security management system, and the system is basically the policies and procedures. So, examine, again, similar to what we've talked about before in relation to fraud and corruption and privacy and the business continuity. It's identifying the risks to your organisation in terms of breaches of information security, develop the policies and procedures and various internal controls to address those risks. Look at your management process to ensure that controls continue to meet the security needs. So, regular review of your policies and procedures, but management oversight as well, audits and training and education and reinforcement of those policies. And there is actually an international standard called ISO 27001 information security management, and some businesses can get certified for their management system, similar to 9001 quality, safety and environment, those sorts of things. So it's structured similarly to those standards as well. It's just been reviewed actually, so it's brought in place the new thing. So you can integrate it quite easily with your quality, environment and safety management systems that you might adopt using these international standards. So that's the essentially the table of contents for the standard there. So requirements of an ISMS, so you've got to determine your organisational context. So that's the external and internal environment in which you operate. There must be top management commitment and leadership. So, managers must be seen to be implementing and supporting the system as well. You've got to plan your actions to ensure the ISMS can achieve its intended outcomes, mitigate risk and improve business performance. Management must provide the necessary support and resources to implement and help staff implement the system. Put in place operational processes, so again, policies, procedures, internal controls to ensure that these things happen. Evaluate performance and improve performance. So again, it's a management system approach, similar to quality management environment. You've got to, identify your issues, set your objectives, put in place your policies and procedures, implement it, monitor the implementation, so your management reviews, and then look to identify non-conformities and take corrective action and improve upon performance. So continuous improvement. So you can see there the same approach to information security management is just similar to quality management, environment, safety management as per those relevant standards. So those standards require you to have things like a policy and set your objectives and develop certain procedures and have certain document and processes in place. Those procedures would equally can be extrapolated across all the management systems, including information. So must have a policy, so obviously appropriate to the context of the organisation. Provide a framework for setting the objectives. It includes a commitment to satisfying the applicable requirements, which we'll talk about, and then continuous improvement, and you must make that available to those that need to know that it exists. So you've got to set objectives each year on what your policy or your information security management is aimed to achieve, and likewise with all objectives are going to be measurable, applicable to your organisation, monitored, communicated and updated. So develop your procedures. So what procedures do you have in place? They've got to meet requirements. So myself, I'm an auditor. I'm a qualified auditor of quality, environment, safety, and information security systems. So from my point of view as an auditor, if I'm coming in to look at your systems and to help you set them up, because I can also do that as well, I will look at, undertake an audit to look at what documentation you have. Do you have the documentation that the system requires, or the standard requires, I mean, and then are you implementing your procedures as per what the procedure states, but also are those policies and procedures consistent with the standard? So it's looking at evidence of documentation, but also evidence of implementation in accordance with that documentation. So that's where record keeping and document control becomes important. So the system, the standard requires you to have identify the scope of the system, have a policy, set objectives, have a risk assessment and treatment methodology. So that's your risk register for information security, a statement of applicability, which we'll talk about, put in place a risk treatment plan, risk assessment report, define the security roles and responsibilities. So that could be within job descriptions. People have certain responsibilities to do certain things about information security. Develop an inventory of your assets, a policy and procedure around acceptable use of those assets, and an access control policy. So who has access to your information, your business information? Not everyone would need to have access to every component of it. And then the risk treatment plans, that's just going through your normal risk assessment process, identify your business risks, ascertain the likelihood and consequences of those things happening, and then putting in place the treatment plans to manage that. So then we've got Annexure A of the standard is the statement of applicability, or assist you in preparing the statement of applicability. And that's essentially a document that outlines all the what you seek to control in terms of information security risks, and then the control measures you're going to put in place. So, and that's what we'll go through now. So reference control objectives and control measures. So the objectives are, or the controls are these 14 points here. So policies, security, HR security, asset management, access, cryptography, physical environmental security, operations, communication. So they're the 14 things that you need to have some controls put in place. And we've talked about business continuity earlier. So then the control objectives are those things there that we've talked about, but then we talk about the control measures that you put in place. So for information security policies, management direction for information security. So that's management, developing the policies and procedures that give direction to employees and others around information security. Then you've got the organisation of that. So that's the management framework. So how's management going to actually go about implementing this? So HR security. So prior to, during, and termination and change of employment. So that all starts with your recruitment and selection and the due diligence that you undertake on that prospective employee, and then during their employment, what sort of level of security access they're going to have, and then when their employment terminates, how you go about removing any access that they may have to your system, or changes in employment that may require a change to their level of access to information that you may have. So asset management, so developing your asset register for management of that, but also media handling as well. So it's how the assets are used, protected and that. So, it could be something simple like a laptop. How, if you're traveling with that laptop, say on a plane, would you take the laptop with you as onboard luggage? You wouldn't go and put it in the your suitcase through the and check it in. You take that with you on the plane. If you're traveling in a vehicle and you park that vehicle to go somewhere, you leave the laptop, say, in the boot of the car, so it can't be seen. You don't go leaving it on the back seat or the front seat of the car, so it can be seen. So you hide it within the vehicle. So that's what that type of thing is looking at. Access control. So again, who in your business has access to information and what measures you're going to put around that. Cryptography. So that's all the the cyber protection that you put in place there, cybersecurity protection and the like. Physical environmental security, so secure areas and equipment. So this is looking at the premises. Who has access to the premises? Using swipe cards to access the premises. Who has access to filing cabinets if you're still using, still got some paper records. Secure areas within the premises, and not everyone needs to go to certain areas of the business premise. Operational security. So that's how you actually go about all the information, the management of your IT system, really, and your ICT system to give effect to protecting business information. Communication. So how you communicate and the measures that you put in place to protect the communication of information. Acquisition development, so purchasing of IT systems, hardware, software. And then your supplier relationships, so ensuring that any agreements that you have with third parties make reference to protecting business information and compliance with your policies and procedures. They'll no doubt have similar clauses that around the access and management of their systems as well. Incident management. So this is, if security incidents do happen, then how do you manage those? There might be some that you need to report to the government. So these are the things that you need to manage, and that's aligned with your business continuity processes. So ensuring that you have continuity of information in times of disruption, and then compliance. So making sure that there is compliance internally with your policies and procedures by your staff and others, legal and contractual requirements. So making sure that there's reference to these things in contracts and ensuring compliance, and then undertaking regular reviews and audits of your system to ensure that people are following your policies and procedures and that your information is adequately protected. So that's ISO 27001. As I said, you can develop some simple policies and procedures and practices to help protect your organisation. And as I said at the start of the presentation, the minute you start bringing employees and contractors and others into your business premises, then that creates a whole new dynamic that you need to manage to, obviously to run your business, but to protect your business operations and information, whether it be your corporate information or third-party information that you collect. So applicable legislation, Privacy Act, State Records Act, Freedom of Information, EU data, so share similarities, Privacy Act. So if you're dealing with businesses in countries in the European community, you need to have, and they need to have privacy provisions. So the reason why I mention these is is relating, I guess, to what I talk about when I help businesses with tenders and grants, is that you're going to get questions around how you manage personal and corporate information. So, if a state government tender, you might get questions around how you're going to manage state records. So any reference that you can give to understanding the State Records Act and the requirements of government to protect and to manage government records would be useful. Likewise, your contract with the government may be subject to freedom of information where others can access documentation. So you just need to be across some terminology that you may come across when you're tendering or submitting grant applications. So that's why I've included that there. Applicable standards that may, good governance principles, well, that's dealing with things like a code of conduct and whistleblower protection, and fraud and corruption control. So there's some standards that you can get hold of that'll help you implement effective policies and procedures around code of conduct, fraud and corruption, and whistleblower protection, and then the information security management standard as well. And as I said earlier, these are linked. Information security standard is modelled consistently with ISO 9001, so quality, environment, safety, and so you can integrate the systems quite easily as well, which is good. So there's also a range of government support that can help you. Australian Cybersecurity Centre has a lot of tools and resources and people that can advise you on that. Then there's AusCyber, which is developing a range of things that you can do and support available to yourself to help you implement good IT security systems as well, and cyber security. So check out those websites, and again, there is support there for you. There's a program that's come on board called Cyber Check Me through AusCyber, which can provide free or low cost support to small and medium businesses to help them implement some rigorous cyber security and other information security measures. So have a look at those websites and follow up with them if you need some support. There's also people within Business Station that can help you as well. So just look at the Business Station website where you can get access to advisors and other webinars and the like. So that's it for my presentation. Thank you for participating. I will send you a copy of this document later, and you can have access to the recording later, or probably later on in the week. So looking at a successfully implemented information security management system, it'll have commitment from yourself as the business owner and the managers. Everyone within the organisation will be committed to it. There'll be adequate communication and consultation during the development of the policies and procedures, as well as the ongoing implementation. There'll be effective policies and procedures to secure information. You will allocate sufficient resources, financial and other, to implement the system. It'll be integrated into your other business processes. You'll continually monitor and measure the performance of it, and you will have documented evidence of implementation, because that's something that I would want to see as an auditor, that you've got policies and procedures in right, they meet the requirements of the standard, and that you are effectively implementing those and continually improving upon the system. And as a result of implementing that successfully, it will lead to, in my view, secure business information in all its forms, whether it be paper, electronic, or other. I think it'll lead to reduced security costs, because you will have those good internal controls in place, and certainly the costs of any breaches. I think your business will be able to respond to evolving security threats, and there's always something new coming out that you need to be across. So if you've got the processes in place, and that will help you meet those. Confidentiality of information, yours and your customers, that's important. Resilience to combat cyber attack, fulfillment of your compliance obligations, so your contractual and legal. And the last two are pretty important: business integrity. So that reputation, you're a safe pair of hands to do business with, because you can protect my personal and business information. I've got no worries about that. So reputation and integrity and capacity as business, I think, will lead to business growth, because you're going to get, if you're tendering for goods and for government work, for example, then you're going to get questions around your business continuity and your information security management. So if you can demonstrate that you've got some rigorous, robust policies and procedures in place, and that you manage these things effectively, then I think that will stand you in good stead to grow your business, because people will see you, as a credible business, a business that they want to do business with, because they see you as a safe pair of hands from all these things. So that's it for my presentation. Thanks for participating. That's my contact details if you want to have a follow-up advisory session. Speak to our IT people in Business Station that can help you with the setup from an IT technical perspective. As I said, I come across it from a management perspective. So if you want some advice on developing policies and procedures, happy to have that discussion with you. And take advantage of other Business Station events. So we run workshops, webinars, and networking events. So click on that link at the bottom there, and register for other webinars and that's coming up. That's where that website will take you. I'm running another webinar on Friday, the 10th of December, on environmental management systems. So that's ISO 14001, on how you can reduce your environmental impact by implementing sound environmental policies and procedures. So thank you for your participation. Good luck with it all, and enjoy the rest of your day.